The Untamed Mind, Richard Lee's Reign of Terror. Richard Lee was never an ordinary child. Born to a brilliant but unhinged neuroscientist, Dr. Michael Lee, he was subjected to bizarre experiments from an early age. His father believed that true human potential could only be unlocked by breaking the mind's constraints. Through hypnosis, sensory deprivation, and forced psychological conditioning, Richard's psyche was slowly reshaped. By the time he turned 15, he was no longer a boy. He was a mind without limits, detached from morality, empathy, or fear. He saw the world differently, not as a place of order, but as a playground for chaos. And so, his reign of terror began. Part 1. The Murders Begin. For over a decade, Richard Lee remained a ghost in the shadows, his killings meticulous and untraceable. Victims were chosen with precision, people who embodied control, societal norms, and authority. Each crime scene bore the same message, written in blood: the untamed mind shall rule. Detective James Connor had spent his entire career chasing monsters, but none like Richard. Each crime scene told a story. There were no fingerprints, no forced entries, no DNA. It was as if the killer had walked through walls. But the most disturbing part was that the victims had died with smiles on their faces, as if they had seen something truly euphoric in their final moments. As more bodies surfaced, fear gripped the city. The media dubbed him the Mind Reaper. But to James, he was something far worse, an intelligent predator, always 10 steps ahead. Part 2. The investigation deepens. James and his partner Lisa Carter were desperate for a breakthrough. Their only lead was an old psychiatric hospital where Richard had been institutionalized as a teenager. The hospital had shut down years ago, but its dark history remained. Upon searching through old files, James discovered a chilling detail. Richard's father had conducted classified experiments on him. One document, marked Project Untamed, suggested that Richard had undergone a psychological transformation that made him immune to fear, pain, and emotional control. Lisa gasped as she read one final note scribbled by Dr. Michael Lee before his mysterious disappearance. The experiment was a success. The mind is no longer confined. He is free. That night, James couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't just hunting a serial killer. They were hunting something far worse. Part 3. The Cat and Mouse Game. One evening, James received an anonymous call. A distorted voice whispered, "You've finally caught my scent, detective. Let's see if you can keep up." The call was traced to an abandoned warehouse. James and Lisa stormed the location, but they found only a single chair in the center of the room. On it was a tape recorder. They pressed play. Richard's voice, smooth and eerily calm, filled the room. "Fear is an illusion, James. You feel it because you are still caged. You chase me because you think I am the monster, but I am simply untamed. Would you like to be free?" The tape ended with a scream. A door creaked open behind them. They turned, weapons drawn, but the warehouse was empty. And then Lisa saw it, a message carved into the wall: "It's only just begun." Part 4. The Mind Trap. Richard wasn't just playing with them, he was orchestrating something bigger. Over the next few weeks, James became obsessed. He barely slept, his mind filled with Richard's philosophy. Lisa grew worried. Was he getting too close to the darkness? Then, the unthinkable happened. Lisa vanished. A video was sent to James's phone. It showed Lisa, tied to a chair in a dimly lit room. Richard stood behind her, a knife in his hand. "You're almost ready, James. Almost free. But first, a choice. Save Lisa, or embrace the untamed mind." The screen cut to black. Part 5. The Final Confrontation. James tracked the video's location to the ruins of the old psychiatric hospital. Gun drawn, he entered the decaying building. The air was thick with the scent of mold and something metallic. Blood. He found Lisa in the center of a room, bound but unharmed. And then Richard appeared, stepping from the shadows like a ghost. "Welcome, James. The final test awaits." James aimed his gun. This ends tonight, Richard. Richard only smiled. No, detective. It begins. The lights flickered, and suddenly James felt a wave of dizziness. His vision blurred. The walls seemed to shift, twisting into incomprehensible shapes. Richard whispered, I opened your mind when you listened to the tape. You've been infected, and now you're finally free. James's mind fractured. His gun trembled in his hand. He saw visions of his past, his fears, his regrets, and then he saw himself, standing over Lisa, his gun now pointed at her. No, he screamed, shaking his head. But Richard's voice slithered into his ears. There is no right or wrong, James, only freedom. Lisa's eyes filled with terror. James squeezed his eyes shut, battling the voices in his mind. His grip on reality was slipping. Bang! A gunshot echoed. When James opened his eyes, Richard was gone. Lisa lay on the floor, unharmed, but James felt something warm on his hands, his own blood. A mirror stood before him. His own reflection stared back, smiling, and then he heard Richard's voice, inside his head. You are finally free, James. Welcome to the Untamed Mind. Epilogue. The rain continues. Months later, crime rates plummeted. The Mind Reaper had vanished. The case was closed. But in the shadows, a new predator walked the streets. One with the perfect mind, untamed and unchained. Detective James Connor had become something new. And Richard Lee's legacy lived on. The end or the beginning?